Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. So Battlefield 1 has finally been released and so far the response from the press and the community is very positive. We also heard that in its opening week it sold more units than Battlefield 4 and Battlefield Hardline combined, which is great news for the franchise as there was a real risk that the bad launch of Battlefield 4 caused permanent damage to the IP. Now, when it comes to reviews, then the media and YouTubers try to get them out as quickly as possible, which they do in order to maximize the views of their review, as that is how they generate their income. But they also hurry because gamers want to know if the game is worth their money before the game has been released. The downside of such quick reviews for games as massive as a Battlefield game is that there's just not enough time to see how the gameplay changes or settles in once the players begin to understand the basics of the game. So as a result, these reviews are usually not able to tell you what the exact gameplay experience on public servers will be like after the release. So many of you asked when I will release my review or if I will even make one. My plan was to release focused feedback on specific gameplay elements and mechanics rather than doing a review or share my opinion on the game as a whole. But during the last 2 weeks I had to think a lot about Battlefield 1, as well as the Battlefield franchise and how, where or if I still fit in at this point. On Monday I then also had a discussion on Twitter where I heard a lot of different opinions and got suggestions like fuck off and go play Arma if you don't like Battlefield 1. So this conversation was why I decided that I should share my opinion with you guys, because I think that it is something worth to talk about as it concerns quite a few players, not just me. So first, let's have a look at what I like about Battlefield 1. It goes back to World War I, which eliminates the lock-on madness that we had to deal with in Battlefield 4, and this is something that I'm very happy about. Then we finally got the dedicated medic class back, and most of the guns are class specific, which helps to give each class its own feel and purpose. Then there's the unlock system, which is much less annoying than in the previous games. You don't feel like you are underpowered when you begin to play the game, since you got access to the essential class-specific gear. And all classes got access to the gas mask from the start, which allows players to protect themselves from the effects of the gas grenades. The unlock process is also more flexible now, as you can use the war bonds you earn by playing the game to directly buy a specific gun or gadget that you want. Then we got 2 additional special classes, the pilot and the tank driver, which are assigned to you automatically when you spawn into a plane or a tank. This is done to prevent players from abusing those vehicles as taxis, as these planes or tanks essentially become the primary weapon of the player. Also, auto repair does not exist in Battlefield 1. Instead, the pilot and the driver can repair the vehicle, but they want to make sure that they are in a safe spot while they do this, because during the repair process you can neither steer your vehicle nor can you fire the weapons. So that is a good way to keep this repair feature balanced, and since you can do it from the driver's seat, it also avoids the issue that another player steals your tank while you are outside repairing it. Communication is key for teamwork and tactics. Here Battlefield 1 provides the best comrose design of all the Frostbite engine Battlefield games, which helps the squad leader and the squad members to communicate. In addition to this enhanced comrose, we also got a new widget that informs the squad member which objective he should attack or defend, and that makes it easier for him to keep track of what the squad leader wants him to do. Speaking of squads, the squad management also received quite a few additional options for the squad leader, to kick players from the squad or to promote another player to become the squad leader. But also squad members received a few additional options, like to mute some of their squad members if required. Then there's the HUD, which is not as busy as in Battlefield 4, and the 3D spotting has been toned down, which helps against the issue of shooting the HUD rather than the enemy players. Also, when you fire your gun, then you won't show up on the minimap of the enemy team anymore, which makes the game a bit more challenging, as players now must pay more attention to what they hear and what they see, in order to identify and actively spot the enemy for their team. The maps do not only look great, most of them also feature a layout that allows for a lot of different tactics, which helps to keep the gameplay experience fresh and exciting. And the dynamic weather effects are just the icing on the cake here, which does not only make the maps feel much more alive, but it also makes the gameplay experience so much more diverse and interesting. On the technical side, you actually start the game again on the PC instead of using an internet browser. And the default tick rate of the PC version has been increased to 60 Hz now, which decreases the delays between the players and makes the game feel much more responsive. These are just a few of the things that I really like about Battlefield 1, and if you have seen my Battlefield 1982 design concepts, then you know that quite a few of those changes, like the pilot class, the gas masks for all classes, etc., were all part of my concepts or wish lists. So is Battlefield 1 the best of all 3 Frostbite engine Battlefield games? With these changes, and because EA and DICE did put a lot of effort into making sure that this game was stable at release, it absolutely is better than Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. Can I see myself playing this game for hundreds and hundreds of hours? Absolutely not. So what the hell is wrong with me that even after DICE introduced so many changes and features that I had on my wishlist, I still do not feel an urge to get home from work so that I can spend every free minute playing Battlefield 1. In a nutshell, this is what I have been thinking about since I could play the trial version of Battlefield 1. I really was not sure why I would still prefer to play competitive Overwatch instead of my beloved Battlefield. Then I realized that it really comes down to what kind of player you are, or what kind of experience you are looking for, as well as which Battlefield you fell in love with. For me it were the original Battlefield games. No, not Bad Company, which I also enjoyed a lot, but I see them as a separate franchise that I dearly miss. What I'm talking about here are the Refractor Engine Battlefield games. 1942, Battlefield Vietnam, Battlefield 2 and Battlefield 2142. The reason why I fell in love with these games, especially Battlefield 2, was that these struck the perfect balance between a military simulation like Operation Flashpoint or Arma and an arcade or casual shooter, which meant that they attracted or targeted a very specific kind of gamer. So don't get me wrong, all of these games had their trolls, team killers, hackers, stats padders and lone wolves. However, when you joined the public server, then you always had a very high chance of meeting like-minded players. Players who played the game to experience teamwork, to play tactical and to win the round. Which is why it was common that in these games a round ended with just 10 or less tickets left, or that the match even ended in a draw, which is something that I think is not even possible in the Frostbite Engine Battlefield games. So this experience is the reason why I fell in love with the Battlefield franchise, as I could only get it in these games. And over the last 14 years my needs as a gamer have not changed, I only have less time to play. I still love fast-paced action games like Doom, and I am dying for Bad Company 3. But what I'm also still looking for are games that put an emphasis on teamwork, tactics and playing towards the objective of the game mode, while not being as time-consuming and complex as a military simulation like Arma or Squad, simply because I don't have the time that is required to play that kind of game. If you now think that it's just the old players like me who are looking for that kind of experience, then you are mistaken. There are still a lot of young players out there who also want that balance between a military simulation and an ego shooter. But while this group of players still exists, the Battlefield franchise no longer targets this audience, as it moved to a much richer feeding ground with its Frostbite generation Battlefield games that now primarily appeal to a much bigger, more lucrative casual audience. The closest that I could get to the original Battlefield experience in a Frostbite generation title was through the classic preset in Battlefield 4. It didn't add the missing features like a tactical map or a decent communication system like we had in Battlefield 2 and 2142, but at least there was a much higher chance of meeting like-minded players on such a classic server. Sure, there was also the hardcore preset, but this never appealed to me personally, because when I played hardcore then it felt like it was infested with snipers, as the decreased health in hardcore made it much easier for them to kill you with one shot. And the lack of a minimap just made it unnecessarily cumbersome to coordinate your actions with the rest of your squad on a 64-player Conquest large server. So Battlefield 1. As I said in the beginning of this video, DICE did include a lot of changes that encourage teamwork, tactical play and playing the objective. But when I join a public Battlefield 1 server, then I hardly find like-minded players there. In my personal opinion, squad leaders do not give orders and squad members do not follow orders. For the vast majority of players, a squad is just a bunch of mobile spawn points. Then there are the medics who can't be bothered to revive you, even though it's not as bad as it was in Battlefield 4. While when you are a medic and want to revive other players, then you get discouraged from doing so, because said players often decide that it's easier or faster to cancel their revive and simply spawn somewhere else. Then you have players driving away in empty vehicles who ignore your pickup requests. Support players don't drop ammo, players are not choosing or changing their class based on what is best to help their team, players don't spot the enemy, the chat is infested with players just insulting each other, etc, etc, etc. This list of bad experiences on public servers just does not end, and this is a big issue for me and other players who are like me.
Need ammo now! I need ammo! I need ammo! ammo, anyone?
So why do I choose to play competitive Overwatch instead of Battlefield 1? Because even though there are also trolls, lone wolves and players who leave the match early, the chance to play with like-minded players who want to play the game as a team in order to win is much higher than it is in Battlefield 1 at this point. And there is not even a classic preset anymore, which would create an environment for players who want teamwork, tactics and play the objective of the game mode without having 20 snipers on a mountain. Even though it's not what I prefer, I want to mention that a hardcore preset does not exist in Battlefield 1 either. It will become available later, but we don't know what it's going to be. The Rent a Server program will also only launch sometime in November, but don't get your hopes up that you can then create a classic server, because based on what we know right now, the customization and admin options on PC servers will be highly limited compared to Battlefield 4 servers, as Procon support does not exist anymore and apparently admins won't even be able to kick or ban a player at first when they rent a server from EA now. So what is the state of the Battlefield franchise at this point? Since Battlefield 3 we have two very different groups inside of the community. On one side we have those players who like the new, more casual friendly Battlefield. And on the other we have players who like the Battlefield that used to hit the sweet spot between a military simulation and a casual or arcade shooter. Since Battlefield 3 both groups engage in heated discussions about the future of the franchise, which leads to suggestions like go and play Arma if you want tactics and teamwork, as well as just go back to Call of Duty and stop killing Battlefield. So who is right and who is wrong? The reality is that EA and DICE intentionally designed the Frostbite engine Battlefield games to make them appeal to a much bigger audience at the cost of degrading the public online experience for their smaller core audience. This smaller core audience wants what they call a true Battlefield experience, while the new audience, which came to the franchise in Battlefield 3, 4 or even Battlefield 1, loves it the way it is because that is the Battlefield experience that they fell in love with. And as a result, they get very hostile when you suggest changes that will change their experience. So the question is not who is right and who is wrong, because both groups of players love Battlefield for different reasons. The question is, do EA and DICE still care about both? We know that these groups have very different needs and expectations, which is why they have those heated discussions. You can try to encourage the casual audience to play as a team and to play the objective, but we know that the changes required to make the game appeal to the competitive or core audience would kill the casual experience. So to support both groups of players, you need to create an additional environment, as that is the only way how you can avoid that the changes that you do for one group harms the experience of the other. DICE did that already in a limited form in Battlefield 4, where they introduced the classic preset, which primarily appealed to their core and competitive audience, and that allowed them to play the game with other like-minded players. After this, I expected to see that DICE makes the next step in Battlefield 1 with a better support for their core and competitive audience, as this late introduction of the classic mode was lacking in many ways. But when I look at Battlefield 1 right now, then at least to me it looks like EA and DICE do not intend to do that. Sure, there will be a hardcore mode in some form, but I think that for the most players who want the balance between a military simulation and a casual shooter, the hardcore mode will take it 2 steps too far again. So at this point I still say that Battlefield 1 is the best of all the Frostbite engine Battlefield titles, and I will definitely play it with my friends. However, at this point I cannot see myself spending hundreds and hundreds of hours playing Battlefield 1, as the chance to meet like-minded players on public servers is just way too small, which means that Battlefield 1 at this point is unable to provide me with the experience that I am looking for to get in the limited time that I have available to play games. I hope that EA and DICE won't drop their core audience in Battlefield 1 and eventually introduce an additional classic or competitive mode that will primarily appeal to players who want to play as a team, play tactical and win the round. There is no need for the community to fight and tear each other apart. Battlefield 1 already has the potential to provide every one of us with the experience that he is looking for. It just takes an extra effort by EA and DICE to make it happen. The question is if they are up for it. So this is how I feel about Battlefield 1 and the Battlefield franchise at this point. And I'm looking forward to hear from you in the comments how you feel about the game and the future of the franchise. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.